when I think about leadership, of all of the leadership skills, how you communicate, how you put yourself forward, to me, that's maybe the number one.
On this episode of Executive Edge, Greg is joined by Camille Batiste, an accomplished senior leader in supply chain. Camille served as the Senior Vice President of Global Supply Chain at Archer Daniels Midland.
If I look back on my career, the element of the job that I've enjoyed most is the time that I get to spend investing in people.
And I think as leaders, too, we have an obligation to elevate people and to help them raise their profile.
To discuss her career journey, her transition from corporate to executive coaching, and key learnings from decades of experience.
When I started my career, I never really thought about C-suite. It didn't even occur to me. I limited myself. So it's not just removing unlimiting beliefs, but also really dreaming about what could be, and what could be is always bigger than what you think it is.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Tenzing's Executive Edge podcast. Today's guest is already well known in the supply chain and procurement community, and now she's on to something new. Camille Batiste is with us today, and Camille is an accomplished senior leader in supply chain with an impressive track record of driving transformation and innovation across global enterprises. Most recently, Camille served as Senior Vice President of Global Supply Chain and Procurement at Archer Daniels Midland, where she also held the role of Chief Supply Chain Officer for the nutrition business. Prior to ADM, Camille spent nearly 2 decades at Honeywell, advancing from engineering to senior leadership roles across aerospace technologies and performance materials. Today, Camille is president of the Blackman Grant Group, where she invests in leaders and small businesses to help shape the next generation of industry trailblazers. Recognized as one of Illinois' top businesswomen and women worth watching, Camille has also advised on the White House National Infrastructure Advisory Council and served as board chair of the Institute for Supply Management. Welcome, Camille, and thank you for joining us today to share your story.
Thank you, Greg. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here and to catch up with you again. It's been a while since we've talked. So let's start at the very beginning. You grew up in Jamaica. Tell us about growing up in Jamaica, and how did you get the chance or the opportunity to come to the United States and go to college here?
So yeah, thank you again for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I grew up in Jamaica, and I don't know, when you grow up on an island, I think every kid kind of dreams to explore the world, right? Because there's only so much you can do on the island. But I had a fantastic upbringing. I hear the same thing from people who grew up in Asian households. You're very much, education is the end all and be all. And there's really only a few paths that you're allowed to take to be considered successful. You're either going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, or you're going to be an engineer. And so I kind of had to choose from one of those. But I had a very supportive family. I'm number 5 of 6 children. Always had the best of the education that Jamaica had to offer. And it was always because that's where my parents wanted to invest. We used to joke that we didn't have the latest clothes, we didn't have the latest gadgets, but if there's anything to do with our education, that's where our parents were going to spend the money. So when it was time to think about college, certainly I considered staying at home. One of the challenges I had with going to university where I was is the one university at the time was University of the West Indies. And there are 3 campuses, one in Trinidad, one in Barbados, and one in Jamaica. Well, I always wanted to double something. I didn't want to focus on one thing. So I knew I wanted to do something in business or something like economics, and I wanted to do engineering. Well, the business school is in Jamaica. The engineering school is in Trinidad. So that wasn't going to work. So I also applied to schools here in the US and got a lot of support from school, got a lot of support from relatives that we had in the US. And they helped me select, of all the schools that I was going to, help me down select the ones that I was going to apply to. And ultimately ended up choosing Stanford at the very end.
Yeah. And what did you study? What engineering discipline did you study at Stanford?
Yeah. So interesting story. So maybe going back to Jamaica a little bit. So I was,
Sure.
I mentioned I was always a good student, always did very well, always chose the most rigorous and challenging program. So I got to Stanford with quite a bit of pride and hubris and thinking that I was just the best thing, not realizing that everybody at Stanford is brilliant and the top of everything. So we had this class where you went through all of the different engineering fields, and I remember asking the question, well, which of the engineering fields pays the most coming out of undergrad? And the answer was it was chemical engineering or petroleum engineering, quite similar. So let's just go with chemical engineering. And then my second question was, which is the hardest, which is the most rigorous and just the most difficult? And the answer was chemical engineering. And so I thought, well, yeah, I'll just pick that one. Oh, and also because I had a background in chemistry and really loved and excelled in chemistry classes. So that's really how I ended up choosing chemical engineering. The second reason is my dad's an engineer. And I remember, so I chose chemical engineering and economics because I wanted to have that business tie. Mm-hmm. And most people don't know this, but Stanford doesn't have, or at the time didn't have, an undergraduate business program. So my alternative there was economics. So the other reason I chose engineering or stuck with engineering is there came a time when the engineering curriculum became more and more difficult, more and more theoretical and high level, and I wasn't loving it. And I remember calling my dad once and saying, Dad, I'm doing these 2 degrees. I'm not really enjoying engineering. I think I'm just going to, drop engineering and major in economics. And my father said, Camille, we are paying for an engineering degree. If you decide to add something to it, you have a hobby and you want to do economics, that's fine. But what we're paying for is an engineering degree. And so I got the message. Thank you, sir. Have a good day. And so that was my encouragement to ensure that I complete what I started, which is a lesson that he always taught us. If you start something, be sure that you finish it. Right. And so I finished it.
That's good advice. I use that with my children as well. Finish what you started. You may be able to change, but at least finish out the season or finish out this segment of it. I'm also an engineer by degree myself. And there were times when I'm like, well, when am I going to use this physical chemistry that I'm learning, or drawing a free body diagram in some advanced physics class, right? You just wonder. But I think what it teaches you is a lot of discipline and how to stay organized and critical thinking to examine a lot of different facts and come to conclusions. So that's really, really great. So you had this economics, sort of, would I call that a minor and an engineering major?
For us, we had the opportunity of actually majoring in both. So I did end up completing the degree in both.
Figures at Stanford, they would have something that progressive. So that's great. So you graduate from Stanford with your engineering degree and your economics degree. And then where do you go from there?
Yeah. So when I was finishing Stanford, I think Jamaica has a problem, and I unfortunately ended up contributing to that problem. And the problem is called brain drain. So a lot of students like me, they want to explore the world and they end up staying wherever they went and not really moving back. So I had the desire to move back home. And when I graduated, it was sort of halfway through the year. It was December, not June. So I recognized that I wanted to kind of take a bit of a break from all of the rigor of, school. And one of the things I always wanted to do was to give back through teaching. And in Jamaica at the time, you didn't need to have a teacher's credential. You didn't have to be trained as a teacher. You just need to have a degree in the subject to be able to teach. And so I reached out to my high school and, offered my services. And I said, hey, look, I would love to be able to teach if I can, if you have room. And here are the subjects that I can teach. I can teach economics and I can teach chemistry. Those are the two that were aligned with what I just spent the last 4 years learning. Well, my the principal at the time said, well, Camille, we'd love to have you. We don't need a chemistry or economics teacher right now, but we do need a physics teacher, which physics is like my least liked subject, hated it. We had the choice to do advanced physics in high school. I chose to not. I chose French instead, not interested. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I gotta do physics. So I was a physics teacher. I finished out somebody else's year. And honestly, Greg, I loved it. I loved the engagement with the students. I felt like when you're teaching physics, you're not really having to deal with maybe some of the other challenges of high school students. So the students who are in physics class have chosen physics. So you have a student who is already motivated, right? Self-motivated. I didn't have to deal with discipline issues and things like that. But I find that people tell you when you want to learn something, teach it. That's very true. I found that some of the concepts came more to life for me as I was preparing content or preparing lessons or even answering questions of the students. And one of the biggest things that I loved about teaching, and it may go to why I've now moved into executive coaching, is when you meet those students years afterwards and you see what they're doing and recognizing that you had a part in their development, it is one of the most fulfilling things, one of the most fulfilling feelings that I've ever had is when I run into one of those students and realize that I was a part of their development.
Excellent. So very, very rewarding experience, it sounds like. But you didn't stay in teaching. I think your dad might have intervened again. Is that right?
He did. He did. So he said, I mean, I would have, like I said, I would have stayed. I loved it. And it didn't pay a lot, to be fair. It really did not. And I think that's unfortunate. So Dad again said, I see that you're enjoying teaching and that's great. I love to watch that. But, you do have this degree that you need to use. And so I did take some time while I was teaching and applying for engineering jobs on the island. And unfortunately for me, that was just not to be, right? So either I had an offer, but it wasn't in the right place, or maybe the compensation wasn't great. I almost had an offer with a very large company in Jamaica, but somehow somebody didn't follow through on, the onboarding paperwork or something. For whatever reason, right? The heavens know why it didn't happen for me there. So I actually moved back to the US and continued my job search there. What was interesting about that is while I was back in the US, I guess my resume was circulating in Jamaica. So someone who worked for a company called Kaiser Aluminum got a hold of my resume. And so Kaiser has mining operations in Jamaica, or had, this is all past tense, this is 30 years ago. Mining operations in Jamaica, refinery operations in Louisiana. And so the job that they offered me was to move to Louisiana and work there for 2 years, understand some of the issues, challenges that they have with processing the product from Jamaica. And then after 2 years, move back home, which was what I wanted. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is the perfect opportunity, right? I do want to move back home. This kind of gives me some experience in the US and then a path to get back home. Unfortunately for me, or for Kaiser Aluminum, I remember when I was packing, so by the time I was living in California and I was packing my bags, and I had a roommate at the time, and she said, Camille, I know you say you're going to spend 2 years in Louisiana, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to get married and you're going to end up staying there. And I was telling her, there's no way that I am going to stay in Louisiana. I'm not going to marry some Louisiana man. Are you kidding me? No, I'm going home. I'm going to spend my 2 years and I'm going home. Well, it must have been a prophecy, because I moved there in February. I met this man in June. I was engaged in September, and we got married a year later. So, and that was 30 years ago. So unfortunately, I ended up not moving back home. We still have a chance, I guess. Maybe I still will, but so far it hasn't happened for me.
Well, but it sounds like a good experience. I just think that that roommate, how did they know?
I don't know. I don't know what she saw, but
did you resist it at first? Did you say, my roommate predicted this? I don't want this. I don't want her to be right.
Actually, no, I didn't even think about it. I think it's after the fact. We're probably engaged for a while, and I kind of said, she did tell me I was gonna end up staying in Louisiana.
So you stayed in the States, but I think you eventually moved on from Kaiser, right?
I did. So once I got married, since my job was moving to Jamaica, I left that job. I did work there I worked in Jamaica with Kaiser for about 4 months before I got married. So when I came back, I had to leave the position because the position was moving to Jamaica. And then I went back on the job search. And really, this was just a newspaper ad. Honeywell was looking for a process engineer. I had all the background and, applied for the job and got an offer about 6 months after getting married. So yeah, and that started what is really what I call the basis of my career. I feel like my Honeywell career is what taught me leadership, what taught me execution, what taught me disciplines. The 20 years at Honeywell is really what made Camille the leader that she is today.
Yes, yes. And you worked in a variety of positions there,
I
right?
did. Yeah. So I started as an engineer, and in my role as an engineer, one of the things that we were really focused on is understanding the material flows and really looking for losses throughout the process. And what I learned after the fact is that as we were kind of doing this technical work and looking for losses, I was also beginning to understand what the business processes are, how we make decisions, and how not just how process flows or how material flows, but how information flows. And the reason that was important is a couple of years in, while I was learning engineering and actually getting certified as a Six Sigma black belt, we were about to implement SAP. And so the SAP implementation team was looking for people who understood the, the production process, but also understood the business process, because that's how you're going to design how SAP is going to be implemented in your business. And so they asked me to join the SAP implementation team. And I started by helping with go lives in other parts of the business, and then using that knowledge to help to craft, okay, what is it going to look like? Because we were going to be the first continuous manufacturing operation that was going on to SAP. Everything else before that had been discrete. And you really feel like at the time, SAP was sort of designed for discrete manufacturing, not continuous. So it was good that I could understand how the system works and think through how can we creatively apply this system to the continuous manufacturing. So
and Camille,
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Please.
what continuous operation was that? Was that a chemical production operation?
It was. This was specialty chemicals. We were in the refrigerants business based in Baton Rouge. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And continuous and discrete are very different, right? People are like, well, what's the difference, Greg? And I always say discrete, you sort of can count the items coming off the line, right? Mm-hmm. There's one phone, there's one car, there's one, but in continuous, obviously, it's just a continuous operation where, like chemicals, or I always tell people laundry detergent, you're making big batches from a recipe and it's continuously running. So I just wanted to make sure our listeners understood the difference between continuous and discrete. So thanks for letting me jump in there with a public service announcement for our guests.
Absolutely.
So you're implementing SAP on a continuous specialty chemicals operation.
And so again, this was back in 2001, I believe. And if anybody's old enough to remember this, this was when the EU had just come together and GE had a bid to purchase Honeywell. And we went through a lot of due diligence activity. GE people were in our plants and having conversations and offering jobs. And I actually had an offer to be a Six Sigma black belt working for GE. Well, if you know the story, the merger was not approved by the EU. It didn't happen. And so all of that went away. Well, in the meantime, I had actually mistakenly applied for a job in procurement. And I say mistakenly, I thought I was hitting save. I did apply. And I remember thinking, I'm just going to hit save on this. And then I'm going to go talk to GE. And if it's a positive discussion, then I won't continue. If it's not positive, then I will. Well, it was a positive discussion. But when I did hit save, it actually said, you have applied for the job. And I thought, oh, mistake. But good thing, because the GE opportunity didn't happen. And so I had applied for this role in procurement. And when I thought about applying for the role, what came to mind is, do you qualify for the job or not? And there were positives and negatives to that. I didn't qualify because I had no background in negotiation, no background in supplier relationships, none of the things that are traditionally procurement. But what I did have was I knew the process. I knew how the system worked, and the people in procurement didn't. I was on the team and we had just implemented SAP. So I brought that knowledge to bear. And the other thing that I brought was I understood the customer of procurement. Coming from a plant, I understood some of the challenges. I understood challenges working with procurement. I understood challenges working with suppliers. I knew which suppliers were good ones and which ones weren't. So also bringing that to bear. And I use that even in my coaching when people are kind of concerned about taking on a new role. The question is always going to be, what can I learn from this new opportunity, which I had a lot to learn, but also what can I bring? And if you have something to bring, then that is a role that you can consider. Sometimes people think that they need to check every single box. No,
Sure.
I've never checked every single box for a role, but I do check some. And then I also bring some things that maybe they didn't even think about ahead of time.
So you move into procurement,
Yeah.
and I think you ascended quite well within the procurement organization there.
Yeah.
True.
I bit the procurement bug. One of the things I love about procurement, and sometimes procurement people don't realize the power that they have. I was pretty shy. Maybe I'm still shy. I don't know, but I was very shy back then, and really didn't. It was very difficult to kind of step out there. But what's really cool about procurement is when you're in procurement, you are representing the organization. So it's not Camille Batiste speaking to a salesperson or speaking to a potential supplier. It is the organization. It's Honeywell. And recognizing that I'm representing Honeywell actually gave me a lot of confidence. And that's really what built my confidence as a leader, is because I had to, once I had the mindset that, you're not every supplier who wants to do business with Honeywell in this space that I manage has to come through me. And
Right.
so I realized, oh, okay, then I can actually relax, if you will, because it's not about me. It's about making the right decision for our company. And that's an objective decision. And so I had to worry less about maybe how I'm coming across or what I look like. And so I actually found it quite energizing and confidence boosting for me. And I tell people who maybe within the company, sometimes procurement is not really viewed as a strategic function. And so internally, you might feel like maybe what I do doesn't matter. But when you look to the outside and the value that you create and the image that you build for your company, I found that being in procurement was actually tremendously helpful to boost my confidence as a leader and to prepare me for leadership positions later on.
Did you find it also valuable way to learn about the business, because you have these stakeholders out in the business, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
really buying anything for yourself to use, right? You're helping the other functions spend the
Exactly.
company's money in the most valuable way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of folks think it's just procurement's there to drive compliance and to slow things down and to make it miserable for the suppliers. And we all know that's different because we've been there. It's really about, how do I extract the most value for the money that the company, in this case Honeywell, is spending
Mm-hmm.
on this supplier, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's great to go out and that's how you kind of can learn the business and learn what the business needs by being in that position. So did that expand your knowledge of the business? As you worked your way through the procurement ranks?
Absolutely. And I think sometimes that came through either making some mistakes and also doing some things the right way. And so some examples of mistakes would be where we in procurement tend to communicate in our own language, right? We talk about things like price savings and even cost savings to a certain extent. And what I came to learn is that sometimes when you're talking to your stakeholders, while these things may be objectively important, yes, you want to save price, you have to save on costs, but why? And there are times when I think about the reason that I'm doing something that could actually influence what it is that I target. So as procurement, sometimes we sort of lean on price. But is price really the lever that I need to lean on? Because sometimes the lever is going to be differentiation in our offer to the customer, or the lever can be speed. And so while you may have to pay a little bit more for speed or pay a little bit more for differentiation, but that's how we create value. And so that's something that I would say I learned first from doing it the wrong way and always just sort of leaning in on price. And then, of course, I had business stakeholders who, some in nice ways, some not so nice, educated me that price only may not necessarily help the business overall. And so I think learning that lesson helped me then to build my brand within the company, that this was a procurement person who could speak the language of the business and look at procurement problems with a business lens.
And so you ascended ultimately to, I believe, VP of Sourcing Operations at Honeywell,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then then you made a change after many years there. You moved on to Archer Daniels Midland. What happened there?
Yeah.
Connect
So
those two stories for us, please.
sure. So I started in the chemicals division of Honeywell. It was called PMT at the time, performance materials and technologies.
Yes.
And during my Honeywell stint, I also moved over to aerospace. So relocated from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to Phoenix, Arizona, and led indirect, and then had this role as a leader of sourcing operations. And I would say one of the things I love about Honeywell is that Honeywell is always going for continuous improvement, excellence. And what we built at Honeywell, and I can only speak for, Honeywell as of the time that I left, I thought was a well-run, well-executed procurement function, whether it was at the business level or even at the corporate level. And we got there through a lot of trial and error, right? So we tried different things. We tried things on, efficiency of procurement and different levers that you pull with regard to supplier relationships. And I still feel that Honeywell has an excellent procurement organization. And so you have to think about, okay, well, how could we make this even better than it is? And I think I got to the point where I recognized that there was no role within procurement at Honeywell that was desirable for me. It was either something that I've already done or something that maybe, yes, it would be an improvement, but not something I'm interested in doing. But we had sort of reached this level of excellence. So when the call came from a recruiter to consider this role at ADM, what was interesting to me is that procurement at the level that we were operating at Honeywell was a new concept for ADM. They knew that there was power in procurement. And let me just preface this to say that when I talk about procurement at ADM, this is the non-commodity side of procurement, not the trading in commodities. Everything was not traded, right?
Right.
So the processes that we had built and the systems and the rigor that we had built at Honeywell over years were not there at ADM. And so there was an understanding that there is value in having a professional view and a professional implementation of good procurement at ADM. So there was a hunger for that, but they didn't have it built. So why I thought this was a good opportunity for me was, while I grew up in procurement at Honeywell, there's certain things that maybe I would have done differently. So I spent my time at Honeywell implementing someone else's vision for what good procurement could be. And so the opportunity at ADM to lead procurement was to implement procurement with Camille's vision. And there were some things that were different with Camille's vision versus what I grew up with. And one thing in particular was around supplier relationships. I really wanted ADM to, while we wanted to extract value, we wanted to be sure that we were doing that in partnership with our suppliers and not as adversaries with our suppliers. And so that was a major change that I wanted to make. The other thing is I took a lot of learning from Honeywell. So we talked about how can it be more efficient? How can we automate some of these processes that are manual? We had almost everything was manual when I got there. And one of the choices that we made was to rapidly automate some of the manual activities and eliminate low value added work. That was a big part of the vision at ADM.
Yes. So I'm detecting a theme. First, you picked the hardest engineering course to go to, right? Chemical engineering. And now you said, I'm not content to, sort of ride it out at Honeywell. It seemed like you weren't feeling challenged, and there wasn't a job that they could offer you at that time that would keep you challenged. So you sought a new challenge. Right. To really build a function from the ground up at ADM. And yeah. And how many years were you there, and what are some of the key things that you maybe learned and implemented maybe as far as transformational changes?
Yeah.
Sounds like you put the basics in place when you first got there, right? Yeah.
So I'll go back a little bit to Honeywell. I don't know that I wasn't challenged. I wasn't intellectually challenged. That's true. But I think that there were maybe process challenged. Yeah, there were challenges. I don't want to walk away. I don't want to say that was I bored? No. We had a lot going on. It was just maybe a difference in opinion on the direction, and just I feel like we could have done some things a little bit differently. But coming into into ADM. So I came in kind of thinking about where do we want to be? And we got some external help to kind of identify what good should look like when it comes to all these different categories, whether it was the organization design, the size of the organization, the savings targets, the percent of spend that we manage, all the things that procurement, all the metrics that procurement organizations measure. And we established a vision of where it is that we wanted to go over the next 5 years. So between me, the leadership team, and others on the team who really had a vision of really making this a function that could be seen as a trusted business partner, here are the things that we need to do. We were actually fortunate then 1 year in that we actually had, as a company, a broader enterprise transformation with help that we got from the outside. And what that did for me as a new leader, it helped to accelerate some of the things. So the 5-year strategy became a 2.5-year strategy because we had that outside help, and that outside company could help us better communicate the vision and the business case, and also better connect the stakeholders to what we were doing. So I think before it was a bit of an uphill battle, if you will, because we were convincing people, hey, if you bring procurement in here, there's an opportunity. Hey, if you engage us here, you have this opportunity. Where because we were in an enterprise transformation, where we all had a challenge to identify value, we found that those relationships moved along a whole lot faster than they would otherwise. So the lesson there for me is that I've seen, and we had some of this as well in that transformation, where we had people in the org who were saying, well, yeah, but we don't need the outside help. We're already on this trajectory. They're just going to come in and take credit for, what we've already done. And I saw it a completely different way. I was like, come on in. Because of all the things that we're doing and we want to do, you can help us in crafting the message. You can help us with change management. And ultimately, we're going to move a whole lot faster with your help than without the help. So I certainly took advantage of the help. And I think that helped to raise a brand of procurement, because they also helped to share, hey, did you know procurement's doing this? And did you know we can do that? And, so I felt like we got a whole lot of help. So while I take some credit for the transformation at ADM, I think the outside party also deserves some of the credit.
Well, but it seemed you needed to support it and get on board, and you saw it maybe as a way to accelerate, right? You said from 5 years of transformation to 2.5, right? So you caught a tailwind there that helped propel maybe your agenda and your mission along further, right?
Yeah. For sure. And there's wisdom in that, right? It's not all leaders will do that. So I think that there is something, if there's a lesson to be learned there, it's take advantage of the opportunities that come across your desk. And that was a big one for us.
Super. And you were also the chief supply chain officer for nutrition there, right? So did you get much into what I would call traditional pure play supply chain stuff? Everybody's like, what's the difference between procurement and supply chain? And some people say procurement's part of supply chain. But supply chain, most people think of logistics and warehousing and inventory management, right? Procurement's more like, well, what are you buying? So how involved did you get into, the quote unquote traditional supply chain activity?
So by the end, very. But the story was, so after doing a nice job in procurement, I certainly was offered several different opportunities within ADM to do something different. And the first one was a role in the nutrition business, and it was called nutrition optimization. And to this day, when I tell people about that role, they think that I was like some kind of dietitian, optimizing your nutrition. And that's not the job at all. So this was within the nutrition business, but the role was to optimize the assets and the way the business is run. And so I reported to the president of that business. And I was also gifted a team, if you will. And as I got to learn the team and what they were doing, it became very clear that the team was doing supply chain planning. They didn't call it that. They said, we are business optimization leaders. Yeah, but what do you do? Well, we connect the demand signals that are coming in from sales to how the plants are operating, and we make recommendations on how the plants can run so we meet the needs of the customers. Oh, that's actually a profession. And it's called planning. And so through that and recognizing that within our nutrition business, the supply chain is really more of a traditional supply chain that most people would have learned in school or, have operated in different companies, that's unique in ADM because ADM is a commodity trading company. And so what we found is that this version of supply chain was new in some of those businesses. And so we wanted to actually establish a supply chain function for this business. And as we were kind of brainstorming what that could look like, the thought was, these concepts are good for nutrition, but they also apply in some parts of our commodities businesses. So we decided to establish a supply chain function to support the enterprise. And through that, I was promoted to reporting to the CEO, joining the executive committee, and charged with establishing a global supply chain function for ADM.
Yeah.
Through that time and doing a lot of different things, including taking on the transformation role, but we'll put that to the side. And over the course of people moving around, by the end, I had this planning organization. I was running planning and logistics for nutrition. And then through the years, I took back procurement, all of it. And so that included the procurement team for nutrition. We had actually combined direct and indirect a few years before that. So I took all of that back. So we had the procurement for the enterprise, which included this business. And then about a year before I left, we brought in the manufacturing. So when you think about maybe the simple version of supply chain of plan, source, make, deliver, by the time I had my last year and a half at ADM, I had the plan, source, make, deliver for the nutrition business.
You can see the whole thing end to end then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Was it more, I guess, fulfilling to sort of see that bigger portion of the business and how well all your teams fit into that?
I think so, and I'll tell you why. There are different ways that you can run a business, right? You can run it holistically with all of the functions kind of all talking to each other, or you can run it in a functional structure. And I've worked in both, and both have pros and cons. I think one of the cons in our experience was that all the functions went almost all the way to the leadership. And so if there are any challenges at a plant level, what you found is that a planner at a plant is having a conversation with a production person in the plant. If you think about reporting structures, they're reporting to different people all the way to the top of the company. And so issues weren't being solved at the right level. And so the change that we made to support the nutrition business at the time, which is very different from some of the other businesses at ADM, was to bring that down a notch so that we actually had more leaders who were more general managers who could actually look at the entire end-to-end supply chain as a whole. And so decisions then were being made at much lower levels in the organization than before. So that was the reason that we brought them together that way, was to solve that issue. And so was it more fulfilling? Yes, because you actually could see now that ideas weren't always having to go to the top problems weren't going to the top to get solved. People were solving issues, and ideas were coming now from the folks who actually see what's happening on the ground. And so to me, that's what was fulfilling, is that you start to see a bit more creativity when you had the decision makers being the people who are doing the work.
Right. And to me, that sounds a lot like what's today referred to as integrated business planning, right? IBP. Mm-hmm. Did you call it anything then, or was it?
We had a hard time just getting to SNOP. I think that we were kind of, you talked about taking on challenges. So while it was a challenge to kind of transform procurement at ADM, I had willing parties in the procurement transformation. I think the supply chain transformation a little bit less so. And I think, and it's much more complex, right? So when you think about SNOP, for example, I did have people asking me, do we really need to do that? Like, do we really need to have everybody, connected to the decisions? Do we really need to build accountability into the process? And isn't it just a waste of time? There's so many PowerPoint slides. And that mindset shift wasn't quite there yet. So when I think about, people talk about IBP, I think, oh yeah, that's really advanced. Let's just make decisions. So right. I think, again, as we started from the fundamentals in procurement, I think that there was still fundamentals to be set when we established the supply chain for nutrition.
Got it. Cool. So now I'd like to switch to today, because you've made a career transition to being now an investor and an executive coach and maybe more. I'd really like to talk about that, because I think, within our audience, there are people like yourself and me who are getting sort of near the twilight of their career. And it seems like you've really made a decision deliberately to do something different and something that's really interesting to you. So I want to make sure we give our audience time to hear about how you made the transition from that corporate world into being, I guess I'll call you an entrepreneur now, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't know what I am.
So tell us how that came about, and why did you choose to become an investor and an executive coach?
Sure. So I'll go back, maybe all the way back to Jamaica.
All right.
For most of my life, my parents have been entrepreneurs. That's all I have vague recollections of my parents working for somebody else, but it's mostly before I was born. So they'd been had their own business for years, and the same for my siblings. And so I mentioned that I'm one of 6. I'm the only one, or I was the only one that wasn't on an entrepreneurial journey, didn't have their own business. And so I don't know, it's always been something in the back of my mind. And whenever I thought about different opportunities that I had, or when I was thinking, gosh, I should really kind of, jump out on my own, I always had this amazing opportunity show up. An amazing corporate opportunity. And I go, oh, but that's really cool. So let me go do that. There was a time though at ADM, and maybe it was sort of the same kind of decision that I made leaving Honeywell, where I made that calculation. And the calculation is it time for me to step out on my own, or do I stay where I am? And I think in this discussion in my mind, where the balance had always sort of shifted to it's better to stay in the corporate role, it wasn't there anymore. And so to me, it was better to move on. The other personal reason that I made the shift is, unfortunately, I have one of my brothers passed away, and he passed away at 57 years old. And while I'm not 57 yet, there's not a lot of years between me and 57. And so I thought, if this has been a lifelong dream for me, what am I waiting for? So, if I'm going to make the job, am I going to make it now, or I'm going to wait 5 years? Am I going to wait 10 years? Well, okay, I have the opportunity to make it now. And I remember when I was leaving, somebody else said, what exactly are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, because I don't have time. I don't have the mind space to even think about what I want to do. So I need to be able to walk away, really clear my mind, and think about what really drives me and really where I want to be. So I choose investor and I choose coach, and I'll tell you why. From an investor perspective, one of the things that I've never done in my corporate career is to run a business. My parents have run businesses, my siblings have run businesses, and even within the corporate structure, have never run a P&L, and that's something I've wanted to do. And so how I'm solving for that is I could start a business from scratch, and I guess technically my coaching business is a business, or I could buy a business or invest in a business. And I've decided that at my age, I don't really have the energy to start one from scratch. So I'm buying a business. And so I've been evaluating businesses for the last year or so, and looking to purchase my first business. At the same time, I'm investing in other businesses as I wait for that first purchase. So that's the investor side of what I do. And through that, I can bring all this knowledge that I have from large corporations to bear to grow a small business. Now, where my love is this executive coaching. And if I look back on my career, all the way to being a teacher, the element of the job that I've enjoyed most, especially when it comes to leadership, is the time that I get to spend investing in people. And that happened when I was a manager. It happened as a director. It happened as a VP. Happened when I was an individual contributor. I love this interaction with other people and helping them sort of see what is what's already within them. And I recently just did this exercise where you kind of think through, what is your identity and what really makes you tick. And for me, it's about being an encourager. And so
Yeah.
this, I'm leaning into all of this. Right? Who am I? What do I love to do? And now I don't necessarily have to do it with this mindset of making millions. I just need to do it because I love it. And so I just want to invest now in the next generation of leaders.
Right, right. So when you're coaching people, what sort of gives you fulfillment? What do
Yeah.
you see? What experiences do you have that make you smile? And you've such a
Yeah.
nice smile, so we all like to
Yeah.
see that. So, but what makes you happy? Which gives you that sense of
Yeah.
fulfillment, and maybe a sense of pride when you're coaching
Hmm.
others?
So obviously I'll coach anyone who needs coaching, but there is a group of people that are kind of my sweet spot. And maybe it's because I was that person where you have they're performing very well. They're doing the job that they were charged to do, but somehow they're not necessarily being recognized as high potential. Maybe as high performers, they're delivering, they're getting results, but somehow they're missing the mark when it comes to, but are they leadership potential? But
Mm.
could they really be in the C-suite? Do they have what it takes to take on more and more responsibility? And so through my observations, I've recognized that there's some skills that are lacking in individuals like that some of those, they just need to know that they need the skill. Maybe they even have it but haven't demonstrated those skills. And so when I'm able to sort of open somebody's eyes to, okay, what got you here won't get you there, but here's what's going to get you there, and I'll share that in a minute. That's where I see people open up and go, oh, okay, so if I learn these things, then I should be able to see people will now recognize me as a leader that I know I already am. So it comes to skills around executive presence. It comes skills around communication. And so we talk about that, talk about being in the room and showing up. When I was younger, I'd hide. Like I always felt like I don't want to be around, the VP is coming to visit. I'm going to be in the plant. No, you need to be there. You need to shake hands. You need to make eye contact. And so it's the other side of becoming a leader, about showing up, being in the room, networking, not only getting to know the right people, but ensuring the right people know you. Because
Mm.
when they're in the room and making decisions about you, the last thing you want, and I would say this I put together this course, and I said the last thing you want, if they're in the room and they're saying, hey, I think one person says, Camille she can take on this really juicy opportunity that we have. The last thing you want is for a decision maker in the room to say, who's Camille?
Hmm.
It's almost
Right.
worse than somebody going, yeah, I know Camille and she's But for them to not know you at all doesn't
Right.
help you. You're not going to get those great opportunities. So it's really helping people kind of see some of that, opening their eyes, and then helping to build on the skills that it takes to not only do the job, but also be prepared for those leadership positions.
Right. You reminded me. I remember my very first job at PPG. I was in a plant, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in a big conference room, and there was a meeting about something. And after that meeting, the materials lead, and he's kind of in charge of customer service at the plant too. Mike
Mm-hmm.
Vislany is his name. He pulled me aside and he says, "Hey, Greg," he goes, "you know, you're a friendly guy to talk to, outside of the meeting room, right? And you have some good ideas." He goes, "You just need to speak up more, and it's okay for you to speak up. I know you probably feel like you're too young, too inexperienced, right? But I know you have got some good ideas. I can tell, and I encourage you to speak up, start to find your voice and speak clearly, because I was quite shy myself, right? And
Mm-hmm.
felt intimidated. And so sometimes it's that one person that helps push you. And I think maybe that's what you're trying to do, is to help these people find that part of themselves that maybe they've sort of let atrophy, and they need to
Mm-hmm.
build up that muscle. And it's not to be a braggart about yourself, or to run campaign posters of how great you are, right? But to make sure people know who you are, to make sure that and I think as leaders too, we have a obligation to elevate people and to help them
Mm-hmm.
raise their profile, right?
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and it sounds like that's a lot of what you're doing, is help people kind of break free from some of the limitations and limiting beliefs they might have about themselves. Is that
Indeed.
part of
And
it?
it is part of it. And also helping people think through, okay, there's limiting beliefs, but what's true of you? And sometimes I don't know what the word is, the unlimiting beliefs, right? What's possible? Because sometimes too, like when I started my career, I never really thought about C-suite. It didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
It was not a possibility at all to be in the C-suite. So I kind of I limited myself, right? Maybe I'll be a director and that's what I'm going to be. And that director is okay, but that's where I limited myself. So it's not just removing unlimiting beliefs, but also really dreaming about what could be, and what could be is always bigger than what you think it is.
Right. Right. No, it's so true. Again, you're triggering me. I remember coming out of school and thinking, if I make it someday, I can be the assistant manager like Mr. Waith, who hired me, Frank Waith, and I can be the assistant manager of this plant. And, it just didn't ever occur to me that, the C-suite was even a possibility anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, at 33, I had then moved to GE, where things were much more aggressive maybe than where I was. And I was a plant manager at 33, which,
Mm-hmm.
I would have lost $1 million betting on that. But, you find yourself, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's up to leaders and coaches along the way, mentors, whether that's informal or formal, mentoring and coaching, that to help really, you find that gear that maybe you never knew you had in you. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's,
Yeah.
it's a big focus of what you're doing now, right? Is to help these folks really find what they need to really confidently, talk about their value
Yeah.
and be an advocate for themselves, right?
I love the term that you use about speaking up, right? Because it comes up in the meeting, in negotiations, whether it's negotiating for your company or negotiating for yourself. It's so important to me when I think about leadership. Of all of the leadership skills, and there's a million of them, to me that's maybe the number one: how you communicate, how you put yourself forward, because you're
Right.
not only representing yourself, you're representing an organization. And so when I coach, I really hone in on that, because if you can master that, the others will come along, but that one is something that I really have people double down on.
I think that's so important. So it's awesome. So people know how to get a hold of you if someone's interested in your coaching services, and wants to contact you. What's the best way for them to find
Mhm.
Camille? I know you're on LinkedIn.
That's the first one. So if you just send me a direct message on LinkedIn, I respond to all my messages. So that's one
Great.
way.
She does.
Or
I'm here to tell everyone
that's
she
right.
does.
Or you can go to my website. It's camillebatiste.com. And if you go to the website, you can actually sign up for a free coaching session with me.
Oh, great. Super. So you're giving people a chance to try before they buy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fantastic. So fantastic. So Camille, look, I always, I've taken, on the last couple episodes to, bringing up a moment of gratitude. I think we've all had people in our career that we are very grateful for. You certainly had a stellar career, and, you're on I guess your next thing here, your next, journey in your career. But as you look back, and some folks have a tough time doing this because they don't want to single out one person. But is there anyone you'd like to acknowledge for helping you to grow as a leader, as you've gone through your storied career?
So I thought about this, and I thought about like naming every manager I've had in my entire career. And I did. I got all of the Honeywell and all of the ADM ones, and I have them written down. But maybe I'll just say, for everybody who has had to tolerate Camille as somebody that they manage, thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for encouraging me to go beyond what I thought was possible. But there is one person that I will single out, and I never reported to him, but he did something very off the cuff, but it changed my life. And his name is Gary Smallwood. Gary was a purchasing manager at UOP, and Honeywell bought UOP, and so we worked together on the integration. And during our integration activities, one day Gary stopped by my office and he said, "Camille, I've really enjoyed working with you. I love your approach. I love the way you communicate. I just love your style. And I really believe that you're going to be a vice president in this company one day." At the time, I was a manager. not having any kind of aspiration to anything close to vice president. And I kind of laughed it off even when he said it, but it stuck with me. And when we think about mindset shift, it did shift my mindset to what was possible. And so while I wasn't like looking for the next VP role, but as I developed in my career and the VP role came, the first person to thank for that was Gary Smollett.
Great. Now, Gary sounds like he had a good eye for talent, and he saw something in you. And I really think that's an important function of a leader too, right? As I coach people informally, I say, make sure you look out for the next generation, and you're helping them to maybe see around some corners you wish you could have seen around, and really understand what's happening big picture. I think that's an obligation from every leader. So that's great for you to acknowledge, Gary. And I'm sure you've had a long list of great people that you've worked with at Honeywell and at AMD through the years. And it's very nice for you to recognize that they're a big part of your growth as a person and as a leader.
Indeed.
So that's super. So Camille, it's been fantastic talking to you today. Thank you again for joining us on the podcast. And I wish you nothing but success and great luck. And I don't think luck's going to factor into it much with you, but all the best as you look to grow your business and really seek fulfillment in this next phase of your career. Really, really great to talk to you today.
Thank you, Greg. It's been an honor. I really appreciate it.
All righty. You take care, and until next time.